What is your name, what are your pronouns, and what are you going to talk about today?
So my name's Zedaph. My pronouns are Z, they, he, and I'm going to talk about asexuality and the ace spectrum.
Could you give us an asexuality 101?
Asexuality is defined as when an individual experiences little to no attraction. That's the first common misconception around it. Asexuality can range massively. That's why there is known as the asexual spectrum. I personally sit at just plain old asexual, but there are a lot of other different identities to explain when a person feels some attraction but not fully sexually attracted to a person.
Could you please give us a brief description of what being asexual means to you personally?
Asexuality to me just means that you connect with the person on a different level rather than sexually. There are different levels of asexuality. You have sex neutral, sex positive, which a lot of people don't know about, and sex repulsive. I'm personally sex repulsed, but there are people who, they don't dislike the idea of sex and they don't like the idea of sex. The asexual is a very big spectrum, but there are a few ones that a lot of people are discovering for themselves and feel they fit in with. So obviously you have asexual, which is little to no sexual attraction to any person. A very common one I've found a lot these days, and a lot of my friends identify as, is demisexual. Demisexual is where you can only engage or feel sexually attracted to a person when you have a strong emotional connection. The big misconception around this one is that people think that has to be romantic. You can be aromantic and be demisexual. You could experience platonic attraction to a person. A big one that I found with a lot of neurodivergent people is sensory attraction or aesthetic attraction. But you just have to be emotionally connected to the person to start to feel attraction. The opposite of demisexual is known as phrasexual. Phrasexual is where, as you become more emotionally connected to a person, the sexual attraction you feel for them goes away. One that we did identify as would be ace flux, which is where the amount of sexual attraction you feel for someone fluctuates over time. I think the final one to talk about would probably be grey sexual. Grey sexual is basically, in my words, the unlabeled bit of the asexual spectrum. You still experience little to no sexual attraction, but you don't feel asexual as the label that fits you. It's just a label you can use that means, I'm on the ace spectrum somewhere, but I can't really work it out.
How did being asexual affect you growing up?
I think we always knew to some extent that we were asexual. We just didn't know the term. A lot of the partners that we had, they couldn't understand the concept, so we felt like just not explaining it to them. So we felt like we'd be disappointing them somehow. Because a lot of people gave us the idea that sex was the only way to show how much you really love a person. Even though you still love that person romantically, sexual attraction is a completely different thing. But I think growing up with it, you always felt outcast because a lot of people, there were a lot of people bragging about how much they'd had sex, or the big thing about body count, things like that. And we felt like we were sort of broken in a way. We didn't have any of those urges, so we felt like we weren't normal. We couldn't fit in because we weren't having the same urges as everyone else. Even when we did have a partner, a lot of people would pressure us and ask us, have you had sex yet? Have you done it? Or the partner saying it to us directly. There's a huge pressure on it because society outcasts you just for not wanting to participate in something. Even though it's such a personal experience, sex is very personal to a couple, it still feels like it's peer pressured. We sort of went through quite a few of the labels to sort of figure out how we are. I think we just didn't want to accept that we were just asexual because there's a lot more stigma around it, especially if you have a partner. People say, well, you don't love the partner, you're not showing them all of you, you're not in a proper relationship. It was still pressured on us, even though we were in a relationship that was closed. You still had other people, popping in and giving their opinion on something that doesn't even matter to them. It's not even something that they're involved in, and yet they still feel they have a say in it. I think a lot of people who grow up asexual, there are so many excuses used against them. One of ours was that you didn't really know you were asexual until you'd either had sex or you'd gone through puberty. It's not about hormone change, it's not about anything like that, it's just about how you feel. People think that when you mention that you're asexual, they have a right to know about your sex life, they have a right to give their opinion on what you should or shouldn't be doing in a relationship. And growing up with that kind of peer pressure from people that you care about, even your family, or people just in general, it takes a toll on your mental health because you think you're broken, you think you don't belong, and then you feel like you have to push yourself away from that to be loved and involved and to fit in.
Have you felt you've been marginalised or stereotyped due to being asexual?
We've been marginalised and stereotyped in our own relationships, which I believe hurts even more, because that is a person that you love and you just show your love in a different way, and yet they are pressuring you to do something that they sort of know that you're not comfortable with. They're supposed to know and understand you, and then they just don't. I think the big marginalisation is that you're too young to know, or you haven't had sex, so you don't know what it's like. They have nothing to do with the fact that the fundamental of your identity. It's like if a heterosexual man said, I'm only attracted to women, I'm like, well, have you had sex with a guy? I'm like, no. So how do you know you're not attracted to them sexually? It's the same thinking, but it's never questioned when it comes to someone who experiences sexual attraction. But the minute you say, I'm not interested at all, that's when the prejudice comes into place. In a previous relationship, they were basically telling us they could only really realise that we appreciate them if we engaged in sex with them. You don't realise at the time that it is because you love that person, but once you come out there, you realise that they did not understand who you were. And I think that's a bigger struggle being an asexual person in a relationship, specifically if you're in a relationship with someone who does not identify on the asexual spectrum.
Has any stereotyping and marginalisation happened at the university, or have you felt quite accepted?
I felt extremely accepted at the university. I haven't had any marginalisation or discriminative opportunities, even wearing asexual badges around the place. We haven't had anything discussed or argued with. Like I've said, the university is one of the most accepting and diverse places we've ever attended. We've never felt questioned about our identity or who we were or how we fit in here, because everyone's here, so you feel like you automatically fit in.
Could you do some myth busting about stereotypes surrounding asexuality?
The first one is you haven't met the right person. You could be with any person and still not feel sexually attracted to someone. It's not about the actual person you're in the relationship with. It's about the attraction that you feel and the association in your brain with, well, I'm not attracted in that kind of way. I can show my love other ways. I can experience a relationship and an attachment in different ways, just not through sex. The second one is that all asexuals will never have sex ever again in their life. Like I stated previously, there are sex-repulsed asexuals, but you can be asexual and have sex. Just because you don't experience sexual attraction towards the person doesn't mean you don't want to engage in the act of sex with the person. It's almost like going into a dark room. You can turn on the light switch and that's fine. Some people won't turn on the light switch, but they'll go in the room anyway. I think the third one is a big thing of, well, you're not old enough to know. As asexuality has become more represented, specifically in social media, it's become more known to minors, and they've started to realise themselves. A lot of people's response is, well, you're not old enough to know. What does them identifying as asexual at that age have to do with you? It's their life. As they grow up, and if they do realise that they're not asexual, they're not asexual. Sexuality, gender, romantic attraction, it's all fluid throughout anyone's lifetime. There are people who have come out as gay at 60 years old. Age has nothing to do with how you identify. Just because it's becoming more mainstream doesn't make it a phase. It just means there's more information around it, so they feel more comfortable to express themselves at such a young age. It's a feeling. When as a cisgender person, have you ever questioned your gender? You've just always known. That's the same with how asexuality works. You just know. You don't have to go through a phase of, trying out and being allosexual. You just know how you feel.
How could the people around you and the university do better?
I think the university does a great job of showing and displaying information about any aspect of someone's identity, whether it be their race, their ethnicity, their sexuality, their gender, even how disability affects someone's identity. I think maybe show more information on the actual spectrum of it. With just showing information on the spectrum of gender, why wouldn't you do the same for sexuality? I think the way the university could do that is perhaps have, maybe even if it's like a Q&A person with someone at the university who volunteers to answer these questions. You could almost organise an LGBT convention where people could come in and ask questions, but they could also learn more about the information. I think that would be a good idea for information, because the university, they have all the information. I just think it needs to be spread to more areas.
How do you feel the media represents asexuality?
Asexual representation has increased massively, and with the accuracy of it as well. Sex education is a good example of displaying all types of sexuality, and I think we need more media like that. There are medias where a lot of people headcanon or characters have been confirmed canonically as asexual. But I think we need it to be stated more obviously in some places. A lot of people, when they want to make a diverse channel, they think, okay, we'll have a lesbian character, we'll have a pansexual character, we'll have a transgender male character or female character, but they never really think about the aromantic and the asexual spectrum. I think now it's becoming more mainstream, so people are incorporating it more into media, but the few representations there are, I believe that they are really accurate. Mainly in sex neutral and the sex repulsed. Sex positive, because there's not a lot of information around that, I understand that that's not reflected in the media. Hopefully that will sort of gain as more information is passed on about the asexual spectrum. On social media, I would say asexuality is represented well, where people can, even in public, if they don't feel comfortable to represent and identify as that in public, they can identify as that online and spread that information, because online you can be whoever you want to be. As a person who is out as asexual online, we've had a lot of support and people ask questions where they don't fully understand things, which is a nice thing because that helps spread the information, it helps change societal views.
Is there anything else you would like to say, or anything else you would like anyone to know about being asexual?
You can be asexual and be in a relationship of any kind. You can be asexual and be in a sexual relationship. You don't feel the attraction, but you can still engage in that activity. It's almost like when you try out a new sport. You have no idea what it's going to be like. You're not sure if you're going to like it or not, but you'll still engage in the activity. Even though going into it, you have no experience. It's like having no sexual attraction, but still going in, because you enjoy it. Another thing is that a lot of people presume that if you are aro spectrum, you can't be in a relationship of any kind. There is more to relationships than romantic and sexual attraction. There are different types of attraction which people don't really think about, but, are still presumed to be part of a relationship. How you feel about contact with that person, the sensual side of things. You may be attracted to how someone dresses, that's aesthetic attraction. Just because you don't experience those two types of attraction doesn't mean you can't be attracted to a person in another way. I think it's important to state that asexual people are still part of the LGBT community. Big thing that we've had is that because you're asexual, you're aromantic, you don't identify as part of the LGBT community. The LGBT community has even discriminated against other people in their community, and I don't understand that. And yet it's a safe space, and yet people need to realise that you can identify as LGBT, but obviously there's still going to be acephobic people, arophobic people, even transphobic people who identify as trans. There's still going to be discrimination, but the more that information grows about it, the more people come to accept it, because discrimination is ignorance, it's a lack of information. So the more that we speak up about it and the more that we explain our own experiences, the more information there'll be, and hopefully the less ignorance there will be.